Welcome everybody to the Resilient Minds podcast. Today, I'm very grateful and honored to be, connecting with an amazing direct response marketer, Brian Kurtz. Thank you for coming on, Brian.
Thank you, Eric. I was looking forward to this. We're on completely different sides of the earth. It's late it's in the evening in my place. It's early in the morning in your place, and yet we're both full of energy.
Full of energy. That's what it's all about, you guys. And today I just want to share, you guys, for those of you that don't know Brian, Brian Kurtz has been a serial direct marketer for nearly 4 decades. And he's never met a
when I was 9. I started when I was 9.
I love it. Yeah. I love it. Yes, of course. You can tell. You've never met a medium that you didn't like, Brian. You've spent 34 years building Boardroom Inc., becoming one of the most successful and respected direct marketing publication companies in the world. During that time in tenure at Boardroom, you've been responsible for mailing close to 2 billion pieces of direct mail. And you guys, for those of you listening right now, he didn't lick every stamp. I'm telling you.
No, I wouldn't be able to talk if I licked every stamp.
I mean, you're responsible for the distribution of millions of impressions and promotions, all the way from media, both offline, online. And you really have been committed to working with some of the most unique direct marketing techniques. You've been known for working with some of the great direct marketing consultants and copywriters to literally have ever lived on this planet.
Recently, it's because I've lived a long life so far. So, longevity will get you a lot if you last long enough.
Well, that's why you look so good, Brian. I mean, look, you're a beauty, bro. So, and recently you've released a new book, Overdeliver.
Yes, and that was it was about a year ago. It was an interesting story about that. I released it on April 10th, and on April 9th, and on April 10th, I woke up in the morning and had a stroke. Believe it or not, not because of the book, but I had a massive stroke only a little over a year ago, and I survived. No paralysis. I had paralysis after the stroke, but I came out of it in pretty good shape. And so I'm on. I've been doing a lot more podcasts now. I'm not relaunching the book, but I want to get it out there. I've sold close to 10,000 copies, which isn't anything to sneeze at, but it's not a bestseller, and it won't be. But I just wanted to go out, talk about it a little bit with all kinds of people, and talk about anything that you want to talk about for your audience, because you have an interesting audience here. So whatever you think is useful, I'll talk about, because I can talk a lot. So let's put it that way.
I love it, Brian, and we're very grateful to have you here. I mean, at the end of the day, it's. I think the book, already, I've been really diving deep. Which, by the way, thank you for sending over.
No problem.
The foreword, even by Jay Abraham, is just so compelling, and a man that I tremendously respect and have had the honor of getting, to meet in person at one of Tony's events, and has been, just instrumental in my learning. So like even having that
too.
Right.
I've known Jay since probably the mid 1980s. So he's like Uncle Jay to me. And I've really grown up with him, and he's an amazing mind and great guy to learn from. One of the biggest lessons I learned from him, which is actually why I wrote the book, why I wanted him to write the foreword, and one of the reasons why I still exist today, is that Jay always says, the idea that if you've done it, you have to teach it. Jay takes that to the extreme. He says, if you've done it, you have almost a moral obligation to teach it. And since my career has spanned, from the horse and buggy to the computer and beyond, I was, the horse and buggy was direct mail, and the computer, will say, is the internet and email and everything involved with online marketing. And I've been able to, straddle both, because, and that was the one thing that I really wanted to write this book, because I really felt that my early days in direct mail, and the internet came along, I looked at it, I said, this is the most amazing direct response medium. You can get faster results, you can get the same ROI that you can get in direct mail, but I wasn't as skilled as some of the younger people who were just coming up. So I made it my business to take what I had learned in direct mail for 20 years and apply it to everything that was state of the art today. To do that, I had to join masterminds of online marketers to learn it. So you have to always be I could be a teacher all you want, but you also have to be a student. And so
Absolutely.
that was like a big piece of my career. And it shows in the book because the first chapter is about, it's about over delivery. But the second chapter is the importance of original source, which I think is important, not for nostalgia, but because if you know where babies come from, you can adapt it to the future. And I do that all the time. And then the third chapter is why paying postage made me a better marketer. And I think I start that chapter with there was an urban legend some years ago that they were going to start charging postage for email.
Yeah,
And
I remember reading
that.
Yeah,
you don't look old enough to remember, but maybe
No, I read it in your book.
Okay. Yeah, you weren't born yet, right? So, so the interesting thing about that was I actually was excited about that at the time because I said, imagine if the email marketers had to pay some postage, it's going to weed out the guys who are just, killing their list with email, and they're going to be much more precise about before they hit send. And that's the way we were in direct mail. We had to have the discipline. You're paying for postage, you're paying for printing. So I'm not saying direct mail is better. I'm not saying I'm better because I did direct mail. That's not what
But
I'm
you
saying.
had to have a strategy, right? Like, I mean,
Exactly.
At the end of the day, you knew that you were spending, and people nowadays, I find that they're just throwing shit against the wall, so to speak, and hoping it sticks.
And the interesting thing is that they also will throw shit against the wall. They'll email their list and they won't get a response. And then they say, well, it's no big deal. It was cheap. Well, I say that it's more expensive than they think, because if you email something that's inappropriate or not applicable to your audience, the odds are that, the next time you go out, your open rates will go down, your unsubscribes will go up and all of that. So you have to really be strategic, as you said, be strategic in everything you do. The barrier to entry in email is very, very low. The barrier to entry in direct mail is very high. That gives you an advantage if you at least have a mindset of direct mail type marketing, even if you've never done direct mail. And I talk about that in chapter 3 in the book, so that you can do better email, that you can do better launches. And I got to tell you, I've always said this. Today I'm like a kid in a candy store because I basically can, when I'm doing email, it's like, wow, I can just give away my best stuff for free. Whereas in direct mail, I couldn't, or I could give away some of it. When we started doing longer formats in direct mail, like magalogs and bookalogs and things like that, I could give away some of the steak and not just the sizzle, and then sell the product. In email, you can give away all of your best stuff. And so people say, well, why do I want to do that? I want to sell my best stuff. And I say that if you give away your best stuff, you'll come up with more best stuff to sell. And that's my premise.
I love that you're bringing that up because I read that the other day in the book, and I just want to kind of take it back to the beginning, because I think that you discussed Tony, and Tony's been a massive change in my life. He's been a huge shift, and you touch on his program Personal Power.
Yes, 1989, and it was an amazing moment for me, not because I did anything, but that was just when Ronald Reagan changed the law regarding TV infomercials. So the infomercial became doable, the 28.5-minute TV commercial. And Tony's Personal Power was one of the first big hits on infomercials. Now, it wasn't him. I mean, he was the star, but it was Guthrie Ranker. They were the producers behind that. And what I did at the time, because I wanted to be in TV, my first, this was 89. So I had been in the business about 9 years. And I really wanted to be in TV. I thought TV was one of those mediums that I hadn't gotten into yet. I mean, I had tested yogurt lids and ATM receipts before I could get into TV. By the way, yogurt lids and ATM receipts don't work. Yogurt gets all messy and the ATM receipts get thrown out. But anyway, the TV stuff was just, it's just something that I couldn't figure it out. And then when the infomercial came out, I said, wow, this is my medium, because I have a brand, Boardroom, Bottom Line, that's not well known, but with an unknown brand, you have to tell a longer story. A 2-minute infomercial won't do it, but a 28.5-minute infomercial would do it. So at the time when Tony's show came out, I remember I took a meeting with Bill Guthey and Greg Renker. They came up to New York and met with Marty Edelston, who was the founder of Boardroom and my mentor and my partner and just an amazing human being. And we met with Guthey and Renker. And we sat there, and I remember what I said to him. I said, you know, Tony has all this stuff. He's got VHS tapes. I'm dating myself, but they were VHS tapes. He had workbooks, and he had all this stuff. I said, we could do something like that. I have a newsletter, Bottom Line Personal. I have a book, the Book of Inside Information, a 600-page book. We could come up with the bottom line way of living or something. And I was brainstorming with them, and nothing happened. I couldn't get my arms around it. It was sort of a disjointed thing. And I'll just fast forward that I kept it on my mind all the time between 1989 and 2004. It took me 15 years. And I got up one night. I had insomnia. It was 2004. This story is in the book. I got up and I couldn't sleep, and I'm watching infomercials at 2 a.m. And all of a sudden, this guy gets on TV. And it's Kevin Trudeau. If your listeners may or may not know him, he's in jail right now. But he was selling a book, you know, What They Don't Want You to Know. And it was all this stuff, like our kind of stuff at Boardroom. It was all consumer information and tidbits and all this stuff. And he was selling a single book for $29.95. And I'm thinking, wow, how could you sell one book for $29.95 on infomercial? Because you'd never be able to make your money back, even if you had, you know, a lot of back-end products. Well, little did I know he had back-end products up the wazoo, because I called the phone number. I got on the phone, and I always say he kept me on the phone for like 3 weeks, but it was probably like a good 45 minutes where he sold me the ebook, and he sold me the transcription, and he sold me all this stuff, and he kept on selling stuff. The telemarketer would keep on selling stuff, all the way down to a Walmart card and a discount on long distance services. And that became his offer. And he was getting on a $29.95 book. I had been told later on that he was making like over $100 an order. Now I knew that I wasn't going to do that, because it was against my principle. Not that it was illegal, but against my principles. So what I decided to do is I'd sell a lot of Boardroom products, other books and things like that. And I got my average order up to like $72. And for 3 years, we were one of the biggest infomercial producers in the country. And that was all about having insomnia one night, seeing Kevin Trudeau on TV selling a book for $29.95. Wow. And it goes back to 1989 to Tony Robbins, when I really wanted to be in the business. But, you know, it took me 16 years. What the hell?
But you know what? This is so fun. So it's great that, like, I think that we learn so much, and you talk a lot about, like, you know, the modeling and really appreciating what people are doing and really having your unique expertise. And it's so fascinating. So you're talking about average order value, and I'm thinking cost per acquisition, and then we all know that the first sale to the client is the most hardest thing, and then the back end becomes like the easier product. That's why we want to create.
Yeah, it's always easier to keep a customer than to get a new one. And the thing that I've talked about a lot recently, I haven't invented anything, but I just repeat stuff that I've heard. Yeah. And I don't know who I got this one from, but it's a good one. And that is, you know, you do your acquisition to cold traffic. And cold traffic to me was outside list, right? Yeah. So you do your acquisition with the second order in mind, and the third order in mind, and the fourth order in mind. You can be a one-trick pony and make money. You can have one product, blow it out, make a lot of money. But the real business for the long term is to have a series of products that people want, that you can relate it to the first product. And I got to tell you, chapter 7 or 8 is customer service and fulfillment. And I start that chapter, that customer service and fulfillment, the back end of the back end. I mean, this is like this is the rear of the rear. And it's a marketing function. Yeah. It's a marketing function, because saving a customer that has spent a lot of money with you is so much more worth it to you than getting a new customer. Absolutely. Now, you have to get new customers. You got to bring people into the pipeline. I'm not saying you don't have to do that, but the idea of back end, and then once you have that back end set up, you know, the idea of going out with an initial offer that loses money knowing how long it's going to take to make it back. And that's what direct marketing is all about. We used to call it our bogey. I talked about that in the book as well.
Yeah.
Lifetime value and the bogey. And the bogey, all it was how much could I lose on the first subscription to make it back? In our case, originally it was for a year later. And if I could, and I had some cash so I could invest. And if I knew that I could make it, I had to wait a year. But when I looked at my renewal rates, I looked at my cross promotion to those names. If I knew I could get my money back in a year, I was golden. And then we accumulated a lot of cash. And I actually went out to a 2-year bogey, and I even went out to a 3-year bogey. I remember on a $29 newsletter, I was losing like $18 or $19 an order on certain lists because I knew that the money was going to come later, and the money today was from 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And so it's a little risky if you're not paying close attention to your numbers. And there was a time where, we wanted to get the circulation of Bottom Line Personal up to 1 million. It was kind of an ego thing for us. And ego is not a reason to do direct marketing. You want to believe your numbers. And I remember we got to 1 million subscribers. We looked at our bottom line and we said, you know what? We're out too far. We're probably out to 3.5 years. And it was draining our cash a little bit. And we pulled it back and we settled in at about 500,000 subscribers. And that was a really neat place to be.
Was it like a break-even point type of thing? Because like even this morning, so this morning I was on a call with Todd Brown. He said hi, by the way.
Todd's great.
Yeah. And we ended up, we were talking the same thing, like cost per acquisition. And so, my thought is, do we want to be able to break even on the acquisition minimally, right? Minimally, and then be able to get that second or third back order to the next step, right? So I think that
I would take it, if you have multiple products though, I would say that if you get into a business with multiple products, you could actually make your best product, I'll call it your hero product. The hero product can lose money, and then the products that get tossed on the back end, those should probably make money in year 1 because you're extending out to year 2 on the first product. That was a good formula for us. And again, it all depends how much cash you have, how much you can invest in media. It's not one size fits all here.
Yeah.
But it is a mindset, as you say, with cost per acquisition. How much can I lose to make it back? What products do I need to break even on the first promotion? But you put it this way, you don't have to break even on every single promotion that goes out if you have multiple products, nor should you have a 2 or 3 year waiting time for all your products either. You got to be really strategic with your product mix. And I do talk about that a lot in the book, without getting too technical, because there was no rule of thumb, but the rule of thumb for us, which is pretty good, which was 1 product is your hero product. You can take that out a year, even 2 years. Every other product that comes in on top of that, you want to break even. Because remember, the products that come in on the back end, you don't even have to sell as hard. You don't have to spend as much on media. You have a house list. It's a name you already own, so you don't have to pay for outside media. So you can break even a lot easier on those products, whereas the one going out for cold traffic, that's the one you want to not have to break even in year 1, so you can extend that media buy further. I mean, that's the rule of thumb that we used, and I think it's used a lot by a lot of people today.
Yeah. So I love it. Thank you. I think that that's brilliant. And I think that, as you discover and in business, I mean, you mentioned that you had some health, complications that ended up working out in your favor. But at the end of the show, The Resilient Minds, it really comes fundamentally behind our experience, right? And I believe that, our experience, as you also share, I think in your book, really profoundly, is our experiences was what determines our differentiations as we apply it to our business perspectives or anything like this. So basically, I just wanted to understand a little bit about your experience throughout the last 4 decades, right? Like, I know that, that would be, we'd be here for days, but my thought is like, how can we, in a Coles Notes version, like, what has been some of the things that you've felt that have, really given you that a few defining moments throughout your career that have allowed you to progress toward that resiliency within you and progress towards that big why,
Yeah.
why you continue to go out there every day, Brian?
Yeah, I think, look, you gotta have, marketing is stamina, and you gotta have a lot of stamina. And I'll do it through quotes as opposed to
Please.
incidents, because I have great mentors, and they all, when they say something brilliant, I put it in the back of my mind, and then I bring it all out in the books and in my blog and everywhere I go. So one of them was from Dick Benson, who was like the best direct mail. He's the guy that told us about the bogey. He was the best guy in direct mail ever. In fact, on the resource site for Overdeliver, you get a free PDF of his best-selling book that's out of print. So that was a pretty good deal. And so Dick Benson said something to me once, and he said, you got to believe your numbers. You got to believe your numbers. Now, that sounds very simple. It's a very simple quote, but I've lived my life completely on believing my numbers. Now, you have to recheck them a few times to make sure they're right, but you've got to believe what you see. And then if it's something that's a winner or a loser, if it's a winner, you want to get something that's a better winner. If it's a loser, you want to beat it. You always want to beat the control. So that was a big, we had a couple of situations early in my career where we really had to believe our numbers, and we couldn't go out with something because it didn't prove itself, no matter how much we loved it. Another thing that really stays with me is Gordon Grossman, who was the guy behind, he was the guy who built the Reader's Digest in the 1960s. He recently passed away. And another book on that site for Overdeliver, it's a site called overdeliverbook.com. And on that site, there's also his book, Confessions of a Direct Mail Guy, as a PDF. And that book's not available anywhere, really, and you can have it for free on that site. But Gordon said something to me. He said a lot of great things to me. One of the things I have on my wall here, it says, first find out if you have a business. And that has been with me my whole life. And what that means is when you're launching something, when you're coming up with a new product, what are the criteria for the minimal amount you have to spend and do to prove you have a business before you start testing like crazy, before you start testing all the media and all the creative and everything else. So that was a big step for me. Another big step, because I worked very closely with copywriters, and I used to call myself a copywriter wannabe, and I worked closely with all the best copywriters because, again, I've been around long enough. I'm 62. So, I've been with...
You don't look like it.
Oh, well, thank you. But I've worked with Gene Schwartz, and I've worked with, Jim Rutz, and I've worked with Gary Bencivenga, and I marvel at what they do. However, the interesting thing is that all the best copywriters, they focus on the list because they know that makes their job easier. And so I've been looking, I've read books, and I have something, chapter 4, which is about, list building and RFM. But I talk in that chapter about the 40-40-20 rule, which I call the 41-39-20 rule. And what that says is that you have it's the three-legged stool of direct marketing. The success of a direct marketing campaign is either, it usually says 40% list, 40% offer, and 20% creative. Now, again, the numbers could be a little different, but I changed it to the 41-39-20 rule because the list is 41, offers 39, the creative is 20. And the reason is without the right list, you're going nowhere. Because if you could have the best creative from Gene Schwartz to Gary Bencivenga, put it up against a terrible list, a list that's not targeted, a list that's nothing close to what you're selling, you're going to get 0 orders. However, if you have a perfectly targeted list for your offer, and your offer is just mediocre and your creative is just mediocre, you're going to get some orders. Is it going to be a business for your lifetime? No, but it's good. You're going to get some orders. And so what I normally say is that this is a big principle for me in everything I've done my whole career. But I say and I only came up with this recently, but with the 41-39-20 rule, it seems like the creative is half as important as the offer or the list. Actually, the creative is the least important element until it's not. And what I mean by that, if you get your list right and you get your offers right, then you want to make the creative the most important thing, because the biggest lifts that I ever got in any promotion is because listing, I was a list guy for 10 years at my first 10 years. So I was obsessed with lists and segmentation. I mean, look at what Ryan Levesque is doing with his quiz funnels. I mean, I couldn't do that, but I understand list segmentation pretty well. And so basically I had my list always dialed in. My offers were good. I would work with the copywriters on that. But the creative, that's where you could get the 50 to 100% lifts in response rates when you can get a new creative from a new copywriter to the best list with the best offer. And that is such a great lesson because it seems so simple, right? It's not that complicated to say, get your lists right. And so online today, I talk a lot about when you're building an email. I mean, email is still the killer app. I mean, everything's good. Facebook's good and Instagram is good, and search is good. Everything's part of the mix, right? But I got to tell you, if you can do really solid marketing in email, you're going to be ahead of everybody else. Now you can bring all the other media in, that's fine, but email to me. And so building your email list is probably the most important thing. And to have a multi-channel approach is another thing, which is if you have a great email list, you could do direct mail on the back end of that. Most email marketers, they have a postal address because they're selling with a credit card. So you could toggle between online and offline in your marketing, because no matter who your audience is, you got to meet them where they are, where they want to be. And some people are going to respond to direct mail. Some people are going to respond to email. Some people are going to respond to, PDFs and all kinds of, you've got to mix it up. And that's been my whole premise, that's why I said I never met a medium I didn't like, because as every media comes into play, you've got to at least consider it. Now, you can't do everything, both in terms of budget and time, but you want to consider everything that's right for your product, one medium at a time. And,
what do you think? Yeah. Sorry, Brian. What do you think of, so I just want to touch back on the 41, 39, 20 rule, the three-legged stool that you mentioned. So, I've kind of I've been studying that rule for a very long time. And I just wanted to get maybe some of your insight around it. And, so many of us, we talk about that, that unique methodology or the unique way that we present our offers before we ever get to our offer. And that's really what the mechanism,
the unique mechanism, right?
Yeah, the unique mechanism. So what I was thinking is is it something where we can use it, and I like to call it the marketing momentum, I guess you can call it, is where we can separate our three components, like, our methodology, our mechanism, our audience, like the list, right? And our creative, right? So if we separate that into three pieces, kind of like the three-legged stool, and then the fourth stool, the last 25% becomes the offer, or like the resonance, right, to our market. What do you think of separating it that way? Because it's very different, but it's still unique.
You could do it that way. I put the mechanism in with the offer. So, and they were equal, right? The offer and the list were equal. I just made the list a little more important, just so that you don't get lazy with your audience. Because I learned this from the copywriters. My first book was called The Advertising Solution.
Yep.
And I profiled in that book 6 legends of advertising. And they were like, these guys were all like from 1930, Claude Hopkins, to 1960 or 70, and maybe even in 80, to David Ogilvy and to Gene Schwartz and Gary Halbert. And all those guys were just, if you read their quotes, it's all about the list. Now, you'd think that these guys are copywriters, they'd be thinking about their copy and the offer and all that, because, Gary Halbert said it's not about a brilliant burger. It's about a hungry audience. And, so they knew that the list was really important, and they did list research. In fact, Gene Schwartz had me do list research for him so he could make his products better. So they knew that their copy was going to sing so much better to a better list with a better, and they could come up with offers. I mean, they were masters at the unique mechanism. I thought what you were going to say, that the last 25% was going to be technology, which is another thing I read in some article that said it's not the 40-40-20 rule anymore. It's the 25-25-25-25 rule. 25% list, 25% offer, 25% creative, and 25% technology. And that was like the stupidest thing I ever read. Technology is over the whole thing.
That's
I mean,
right.
Yeah. So it was, and then I got this great quote from my book from Bill Bernbach, who was one of the madmen from the 60s. And he said, you know, you never want to adapt an idea to a technique. You want to adapt a technique to an idea. You got to have that idea. The idea would be the mechanism, the offer. What are you going to offer? The product. And you want to adapt that to whatever technique. And a technique could be online, offline, anywhere. But the idea that technology would be equal to list and offer and creative, I don't buy it. It's super important. I mean, technology puts everything on steroids, obviously. And I'm not a Luddite, but that was crazy that someone would say that. I just, you know, that's just my opinion. But
so Brian, I love it, and I think it's a great opinion. I think it's very valuable. I mean, tell us, like, describe the process behind the evolution of really taking, you know, the direct mail side of it, and now, you know, building more online, getting to the next level. And in fact, now you have the Titans Accelerator going on. So, like, describe the process of that whole evolution, because you said, you know, I mean, you've been around since we had to, you know, be, you know, licking us.
Yeah, I was around, right? With the horse and buggy, right?
That's right. So I mean, describe the process of that whole evolution, because we all know that it's our decisions to adapt to situations, especially with, like, you know, the change in the climates as business owners, COVID, things going on. We all need to adapt now. So, and you've adapted for the past 4 decades. So what's that process like for people that are like, holy cow, I can't change things, or I can't do things, or I can't do things differently?
That's a good question, because I mean, I'm living it. So I don't see it like that. Like, like people say, you know, what do I have to do differently in the world of COVID? Well, you just keep moving. I mean, you know, you got to keep moving. And, you know, so, you know, you should have invested in Zoom before, you know, COVID. That would have been a good investment. But I mean, I think that you have to be adaptable. You have to be able to take whatever you did online, offline, whatever you did offline, online. But that's the simple part of it. The more complex part of it is to start looking at, like, I'll talk about this launch I'm doing. So if I was going to launch, well, I wouldn't probably, you know, in the 80s, I wouldn't launch a virtual mastermind. But if I'm launching a virtual mastermind that has no live events, it's all on either Zoom, but there's also an offline component, because I send something every month to the members. But doing that as a launch, as opposed to just a promotion, is a decision that you have to make. And to do it as a launch means you've got to come up with training. You've got to come up with something of value. You got to think about, which I didn't have to think about in direct mail, and this is true with product launch formula, it's true with quiz funnels, it's true with click funnels, it's true with everything, that you have to come up with a way to market something that if they don't buy, and you want to make an attempt to make them buy, but if they don't buy, that they're left with something of value, of tremendous value. And so, you know, I'm doing this, you know, I have these 3, you know, training videos, and people go through them. And on the 4th video, I tell a story about the Titans of Direct Response event back in 2014, where we got all the best speakers in the industry, and it was an all-star cast and all that. And it was all a true story. And that I realized at that event that, you know, what I was doing there on the VIP day was that I was doing hot seats for an entire day. And that's what I want to do the rest of my life at some point. And so this Titans Accelerator became the dream that was. And that's all true. But then I go into a bit of a pitch, and I'm the worst pitch man. I mean, Joe Polish once called me the director of sales prevention. So you know, I have to stretch myself a little bit. But I knew that I was selling in the 4th video. If they shut me off at that point, I knew I delivered something in the first 3 videos about developing your it's not a network, because in the last chapter of my book, I said I hate the word networking. I contribute to connect. That's my difference in terms of networking. So to contribute to connect, you've got to first surround yourself with the best people for knowledge. Then you have to go deeper into the people that you want in your audience and who the people that you want to learn from the most. And then hopefully your mentors choose you. And then you take the next step, which is, your mentors choose you. You don't always go for the cash. You look at different ways you can get paid besides cash. And that's my 3-video series. That stands alone. There's no pitch in any of that. And so that's a great way to sell, because, it's sort of like, here, I'm laying it out for you. This is what I do. This is what I teach. If you want to be with me, that's good. If you don't want to be with me, you can find somebody else. Hopefully this was useful to you. And if you're ever ready, whenever you're ready, I'm here. I'm here if you need me. And that's I call that fishing without bait. I got that from Dean Jackson. And fishing without bait is just, you have a lake and you're on a sailboat, a rowboat in the middle of a lake, and there's fish in the water, and those are your potential prospects. And you throw, normally you just throw the reel and the hook and the delicious bait in the water, and fish come up. You put them in a funnel when you get them in the boat, and you sell them. And that's a good way to do it. Yeah. I do it a little differently, and a lot of people do as well, which is fishing without bait. Which I do is I shine a spotlight over the water. That's my content, my value add. Every once in a while, I'll sprinkle in an offer for an educational product. They don't have to buy. They can still get the educational stuff. Yeah. And my theory is, at some point, the people that I want and the people that I'm attracting are going to just jump in the boat. Absolutely. If they don't jump in the boat, I probably don't want them anyway. That's right. Every once in a while, when I do a launch, I have to push a little bit more. But even there, I'm fishing without bait until I put the bait in the water. And then the offer's got to be irresistible, because it's got to be, and that's why launches are so great. That's why, Jeff Walker's product launch formula is such a great product. I mean, because, and people have expanded on it, and, you can do it with webinars, and Jeff has done that too. But, it's just giving away great content leading towards a great offer, and, an irresistible offer, and get the people in your tribe that you really want. And that is, to me, the best way to do marketing.
And it's fun. I love it, because I completely agree. And it doesn't feel like you're ever pushing. You're coming from a place of abundance always. It feels like you're just serving at the highest level. Exactly. And I find that that's so important.
Now, we couldn't do that as much in direct mail, because in direct mail, when I started, it was mostly number 10 envelopes, and we had to, we had to sell almost all the time, because it was too expensive you couldn't give away content. One of the biggest breakthroughs in direct mail, and I'll tell you how it relates to today. This is a good one. So we started doing long form direct mail, just like we did in infomercials on TV, because we had a story to tell of a brand that people didn't know much about. So we developed these magalogs and bookalogs. A magalog looks like a magazine. It's like 24 pages. It's a promotion, but in there's content as well. So it's all sales, basically. It's a promotion piece, and it's got an order form, and it's got everything you want in a promotion. But there's like articles, there's sidebars, there's like articles like we used to do stuff with our books. It would be like, the 5 things to know, to prevent a thief from breaking in, and you give them 3 of them, and then the other 2 are on page whatever in the book. Yeah. So that was it was a fascination approach, bullets. But we were able to give away some of the steak. So why is that any different? I love that, because now you're giving them, and then the bookalogs were like 64 pages, like a booklet. I mean, they used to sit on nightstands, and we used to wait a long time to get our full response, because people thought it was something worthwhile. I mean, it was worthwhile, but it was a promotion. The whole thing was a promotion. We weren't fooling them when we put a price on the bookalog or the magalog. We weren't fooling them, but we were basically giving them some content. So isn't that a precursor to a launch with PLC 1, product launch content 1, product launch content 2, product launch content 3? You show a transformation, you show what the benefits are for the buyer. There you do no sales. Then you do a webinar. Then you do a question and answer. I'm doing one on Thursday, a question and answer for the people who are in the launch. But then you don't open the cart until you've given them as much information as possible. And I even saw it with our TV. Our TV ads and infomercials, the internet was going strong, believe me. It was 2005 when we got into TV. But what we did was on the TV, we had this show that built on, these doctors that were giving all their information that's in the book. And we never gave a call to action until like 24 minutes into 28 and a half minutes. Most infomercials, you have 3 parts. You have usually the 7 minutes pitch, 7 minutes pitch, and then 7 minutes pitch. And so, with an exercise machine, you show it, you show a couple of testimonials, you pitch it. Then you show some more testimonials, you pitch it.
Yeah.
That wasn't our offer. Our offer was building and building. And then it was doctor. Hey, but wait, we've got more books. And we had a newsman interviewing our medical expert. It was all building and building. And we couldn't do the call to action earlier up because the full offer wasn't available yet.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly. So
they would have had it 25 minutes. And it was funny. We used to do these maps and all the orders would come in like all at once, but that's the way you did it. And, a lot of that is what product launches do today.
And that's how it's been like a successful. Yeah.
Well, in product launches, a lot of them you get like, I don't know, sometimes 70% of your orders on the last day.
Yeah.
I mean, it spreads out more these days because people are doing different things. So I see a lot of parallels between, the direct mail and the TV that we did and what's happening today with funnels,
online,
with launches. So it's all related. And so I'm in mastermind groups. I spend about $150,000 a year on being in other people's mastermind groups so I can keep up on everything that's state of the art. Not that I'm going to do it per se, but I want to learn it and I want to teach it.
That is phenomenal. And literally that's where I was going to go next is like, where do you get some of the best ideas? Where do you get some of the best ideas from? Because, we both believe in our self-investment. We're both spending time, always learning. Tony talks about consistent and never-ending improvement. And, for me, it's fundamental. And as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, as a marketer, as anybody that wants to really move the needle forward in their business, what should they be doing to really create more ideas in their own business? And also, Brian, how did you come up with some of your best ideas?
It's like a combination, I say often, I haven't invented anything in my life, but it's the accumulation of the best minds. I mean, never being the smartest person in the room. They say if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. I didn't make that up. Confucius did. If you can combine, I mean, I basically, with the infomercial, for instance, that was the biggest success that I ever had at Boardroom. And it was just a combination of things. It was Tony Robbins in 1989. It was Kevin Trudeau in 2004. Then it was Steve Dwarman, who was my producer, who I got. Then it was getting my copywriter, Arthur Johnson, to be the star of the show because he knew more about the health information in the book than anybody because he wrote about it and he read the book cover to cover 6 times. So he became the guy. Getting Hugh Downs, who was a newsman, a legendary newsman, to be the host of the show. Getting all of those things were just like different things that I learned and I put them together. And, and I think that's true for everybody, how does Ryan Levesque come up with quiz funnels? I mean, he was a student of, traditional direct marketing and list segmentation. And he realized that different messages have to go to different list segments. And he started doing buckets and all of that stuff. And you put it together. He invented something. I didn't. Jeff Walker invented something. I didn't. But I did put together the ideas. And also, when you're at a mastermind, not every idea is going to be a gem, but it just takes one, and you adapt it to what you do. And I guess it's hard to explain because all the ideas, and I've had a lot of failures and a lot of successes, but every one of them, whether it's a failure or a success, came from like a combination of sources and a combination of ideas. And usually you have to be out there listening, paying attention. You never know where the next idea is going to come from. And I say, you know, stealing is a felony. Stealing smart is an art. And
I
you
love
can
it.
smart all the time. It's just great. And
Like Steve Jobs, somebody asked him once, you know, where are all the good ideas? Where do you get all your good ideas to? And he said, all good ideas are stolen. What are you talking about?
they are, but they're adapted to your.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
there are a lot of people that, you know, people look at my email list, I mean, and say, oh, Brian, you could be making so much more money. You don't do affiliates. You don't do this. You don't do that. I'm happy with what I'm making. It's a matter of also, you know, that's the other thing. You know, some people want to go for every dollar, and that's fine. I don't begrudge anybody that. But that's not my game. That's why I'm called the director of sales prevention, because I don't go after every single dollar, but I go after the right dollars. I think I go after the dollars from people who I can help the most. They will get the most out of me, and I don't want people wasting their time with me, and I don't want to waste time with them.
And I
So
think
finding that real avatar, the people that you really want to be with. I talk about that in the second video with it's a Dan Sullivan concept. He's a great coach, and Dan Sullivan, who you're looking for is you. I mean, and it's not an egocentric thing to say that, but the values you have, the things that are in your view is what you're looking for in the outside world, and you don't even realize it until you dig deep into that. And I do this exercise that's really, really powerful. And,
wow, that's like it's really is congruent, because I think that when you are really centered and you come from, and I always talk about, you know, the heart centeredness of an entrepreneur or a heart led leader. And, you know, when you are congruent with yourself, you can be congruent to your audience, because they're going to attract, right? So
I love the word congruent. I have that. I talk about that a lot in my book, because I didn't invent that either, but being congruent is like so important. Being congruent, consistent. 100%. Yeah, I mean, I know, and I'll tell you something. I'm not always congruent or consistent.
Same.
I'm at a stage in my life where I know, like, I know when my integrity's out. I know when I step outside, and at least I can catch myself. Sometimes I need somebody to tell me.
We're not perfect. We're human, right?
Yeah, you got to take it in and adjust and apologize and all of that. So,
and I think that's where like your values show up, because I was just going to ask you, like, how do your values show up in your work? And I think you, without me even asking that, you already just the essence of that whole, you know, question, the answer is already there, like just who you are, Brian. So
it is.
So we're that, I think that's super important. So Brian, you've given us a massive process of, like, in your book, in the way that you serve, in the way that you show up, in how you know, want to continue to serve. Why do you think so many people fail?
Well, you know, I'm not one of those people that say they fail because they're lazy, or they fail because, I mean, lazy people can be successful, ambitious people can be failures. I mean, it can go either way. I think that, and this is where I tell you where I failed, is that it's probably, you know, it's usually because most entrepreneurs are ADHD to begin with. I mean, you know, you know, there's a theory out there, and it's proven by medical professionals who study ADHD, that there'd be no entrepreneurs without ADHD. So, you know, you have to be crazy a little bit and a little bit off, you know, a little bit missing your priorities to get narrowed down. So you need help with that. But if you can manage that, it's so much better. So I think a lot of failure comes from the shiny objects, being in all places and trying to be everything to everybody. I think where you can get success after you've had some failure, and what I try to do with people in my masterminds is I try to get them to, you know, go narrow before they go wide. And if they're too wide, narrow it down. So, you know, it's not that complicated to go niche before you go wide. And the tighter the niche, you know, owning a niche, getting something out of a niche, and getting even more money for it because it is a niche, that process alone can create success from failure. A lot of the failures I see in my groups and things like that is people who are just all over the place. Every new medium is something they have to test, which I had that. I told you, I never met a medium I didn't like. That's a negative in some respects. You've got to narrow it down. You've got to, just confine yourself. I have a bunch of stories in my book about that, about trying to be everything to everybody. Like Tony Robbins is at the height of personal development, let's say. There are a lot of people in personal development who are failing because they're trying to be Tony Robbins instead of being something more narrow. I remember there was a guy in one of my groups that, I think the story's in my book. He said he wanted to do a product or a course for men in their midlife crisis. Now that's pretty broad. So I asked him, I said, men in their midlife crisis, what qualifies you to do that? And he said, well, I was 53 years old. I had a nervous breakdown. My wife left me. I don't talk to my kids. I lost my job. I went bankrupt. I almost committed suicide. It was a whole process. And then he said, I came out the other end bigger and better, and I want to teach that. I said, that's a start. Okay, so he gave me a pretty good answer that he has the experience. I said, and the question I asked him was the key question. I didn't know it at the time. I said, what were you doing for a living when you had the nervous breakdown? And he said, I was a lawyer. And it went off in my head. I said, why don't you start, instead of being, the guy who's going to end misery for every single person, every single man in a midlife, just go to recovering attorneys. There are more than enough of them to go after them, and then you're speaking to them. Then your marketing gets better because now you're speaking from your experience, and then you can narrow in. You could give even stories of when you were in court or when you were on a case or something like that. Things that they would see that would cause them agony or grief or whatever. So I'm not saying every situation has that kind of an answer, but that one was so obvious. I mean, I've had a bunch of those in my career since I've left Boardroom. And those are just wonderful because then you start developing the product. And you know what? I understand that his remedy might be for anybody. Tony's remedy is for everybody. But if you're just starting out, make your remedy for lawyers, and then your marketing gets so much better. Your messaging gets better. Your lists are more targeted. Everything about it gets really narrowed in. And then you may even talk about, it's not just a midlife crisis, but it's just because you were, depressed, and not just, not suicidal, but depressed. So, what does a depressed lawyer do at 50 years old? And that sounds like a very narrow market. I don't think so. I think it's wide enough to get a big mastermind group and a following that could take your course and all of that. So,
but that just shows your the brilliance that you bring to the table, Brian, right? Like there's things, and I think that's so many of our clients will think that way. They think very broad, and our job is to bring them into this narrow focus, right?
Right. And
I think
I'm not the only one the best coaches all do that. Dan Sullivan says that management is to 1980s as coaching is to today. Yeah. Everybody needs a coach. Everybody needs somebody to see the things. And this is old news. Yep. You got to see all the blind spots. Someone has to do it. But that's the difference sometimes. That's a big one between failure and success. Yeah. I think people do fail because they expect it. They think it's just coming to them. They aren't precise enough. I think some of my biggest mistakes are when, I'm just not meticulous enough. I'm ADHD. I'm a 9 quick start and a 3 follow through. I got to have somebody taking care of the details. And when the details aren't, taken care of, my work suffers, and I can't do it. I mean, I say Dan Sullivan also has a great phrase, like in terms of retirement, and I'm never going to retire because my work's my play. But the definition of retirement for me is that I want to retire from all the things that I don't do well. I want to retire from all the things I don't like to do. And I want to retire from people I don't want to hang around with anymore. So based on that definition of retirement, I'm like 80% retired, 85%. Yeah. And so I think if you can get to that, and look, we can't all get to it early in our career, but if you're working towards that, to me, that's bliss. And I'm not in bliss every day, but I enjoy every day, especially, I enjoyed it before my stroke. That I almost died a year ago makes me enjoy it even more. It's just, life is wondrous. And, I know when I got on the phone with you, I said, "How you doing, Eric?" You go, "I'm great. I'm doing fantastic." That's the attitude you have to have. And you can't be, you're going to be depressed sometimes. You're going to be miserable sometimes. We're all human, but you got to get out of it. You got to, pop your way out of it. And there are a lot of ways to do that.
Brian, I want to be, I'm just, first of all, just very thankful, but, before and I want to be conscious of your time. So if anybody here is listening back, how can they find you? Where can they go find more information about the book, about the Titans Mastermind, anything to do, Brian Kurtz?
Yeah. So, there's a lot of different URLs and websites, but the best way, well, actually, I'm going to give the one that you have to spend $17 for. And that's my book, because my book comes with, if you buy, don't go right to Amazon, go to overdeliverbook.com. And if you want to spend $17 to get thousands of dollars worth of bonuses, this is the place to go, www.overdeliverbook.com. And you go there, and not only are Dick Benson and Gordon Grossman's books completely there, but I have 19 keynotes from Jay Abraham. I've got a course from Jay Abraham. I've got a full day with Perry Marshall. I've got a Dan Kennedy swipe file that he did specifically for the Titans of Direct Response. I just have great stuff on that site. I have a swipe file going back to 1900 of the best direct mail. So you go to that site. There'll be a button to go buy the book on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. You come back to the site. You opt in. You get access to all of this stuff. Overdeliverbook.com. You got to buy my book at $17.
Beautiful.
I don't make anything on that, but I think it's a worthwhile investment. Now,
absolutely,
it's too cheap to do that. Just go to briankurtz.net, www.briankurtz.net, BrianKurtz, and you go there and you opt in for another interview. And there's tons of free content on the site. There's my blogs going back 5 years. And you don't have to spend a dime, and you can save $17 and get a lot of the stuff that's in my book. You can have a good time there. If you want to look at Titans Accelerator, at the top of briankurtz.net, there's products and work with me. Go to work with me, scroll down past the testimonials, and you'll see Titans Accelerator. Go to that page and just take a look at what I'm offering. It's an amazing, and until this Sunday, and of course, when the podcast comes out, you won't be able to get in. But now, if you're listening on Facebook or watching on Facebook, just go there. And if you get on that site, I've got an amazing deal there where you can get in for a year. You can get a free copy of either Gene Schwartz's Breakthrough Advertising or Brilliance Breakthrough, if I have the rights to both of those books. And the benefits are amazing. There are live calls, there are recorded calls, there are stuff from the vault, from my mastermind group, that great speakers, Dan Kennedy, Jeff Walker, just great stuff.
And for those of you, sorry, Brian, for those of you, did you want to add anything real quick, Brian? Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that's it. It's overdeliverbook.com or Brian Kurtz.
And for anybody that's listening later on the podcast, it's going to be the links. I'll add them into the show notes for anybody as well. So
that's great.
And Brian, with that, I just wanted to ask one final question, because you did, you talked about something with regards to playing and working, and I read in your book, it was something that really spoke to me, and you quoted something, and I'll read it real quick, because I think that it really spoke to me in a powerful way. And people always tell me, they're like, Eric, you work so freaking hard. And it said, from Unitarian minister L.P. Jacks, you said, a master in the art of living draws no sharp distinction between his work and his play, his labor and his leisure, his mind and his body, his education and his recreation. He hardly knows which is which. He simply pursues his vision of excellence in whatever he is doing and leaves others to determine whether he is working or playing. To himself, he always seems to be doing both.
That was on the back of Marty Edelston's business card. I have it on my wall here too.
Wow.
On Marty's business card, it said Zen Buddhist text. And I looked it up and I found this reverend that took credit for it. I don't know where it came from, but it's an amazing quote, that
it really spoke to me.
Yeah,
Really
it
spoke to
spoke
me.
to me too. You know, and it spoke to me. I remember I was at a conference once, and Paris Lampropoulos was there. He's one of the best copywriters in the world. And I introduced him to somebody. I said, "This is one of my best friends in the industry, Paris Lampropoulos." And Paris looked at me and he goes, "What do you mean in the industry?" And I thought about that. Like, some of my best friends I work with, some of my best friends I don't work with, they're all one. And that was the moment. That was like probably 10 years ago or more, maybe more. And that was like the moment that I said, I have friends or I don't have friends, or and Paris is one of my best friends, period, you know? And just because I met him through work versus play, doesn't matter. Just doesn't
That's right.
matter. And that
Right.
took it further to that quote and all of that.
I love it.
But, and Marty was a great role model for that. He was a bit of a workaholic, but
So last question.
What's that?
Last question. If you had 3 days left to live, what would you do?
Well, I would certainly be with my family. I'd be with my wife and my kids. I probably just want to go somewhere with them, and I don't know, experience something that I hadn't experienced in my life yet. I mean, but nothing extravagant, like not going to a particular place, but maybe just with them, to spend the last 3 days, on a cabin on a lake or something, just to, get my act together with my life and where I am. And because I don't, when I almost died a little over a year ago, I woke up in the hospital and I realized I was going to survive because I had passed out completely. And when I woke up, I said, what would I have left? What was the footprint I left if I had died? And I don't like the word legacy, because legacy, implies that you're dead. So I realized that it's the living legacy, not the death legacy, that I was more interested in. And it's interesting, the book site, I was making jokes about it, but overdeliverbook.com became the thing that I felt was more important to leave than even the book, because everything on that site is an homage to one of my mentors. And, we're always on the shoulders of someone else. And so, I mean, during those 3 days, I would probably watch the movie Coco again. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a movie it's a Mexican film. It's Pixar film. It's like a kid's film, but it's more than that. And it's an amazing film, and it's all about Dia de Muertos, where in Mexico they honor their dead, for a couple of days during the year. I think it's in November, maybe 2 or 3 days. And the point of the film to me was that you're not really dead as long as you're still remembered. So that's the death legacy, but you're sort of alive. And so that would be an important movie to see on my last 3 days. But I want to live this legacy before I die as well. So I'd say that would be, that was an important lesson. I didn't get up from my stroke and say, now I'm going to live, because I was living before. But those were some of the things that went through my head when I woke up, and I thought about, if I wasn't here, would I have loved, would I have had a good life? And the answer was yes. But now that I'm alive, I can continue teaching and being with the people I love and the people I even like, because I like a lot of people. I love much fewer, but I kind of try to love everybody. Sean Stevenson, who passed away recently, said, and he was an amazing speaker, and he lived his whole life in a wheelchair. He had brittle bone disease, but he was a big public speaker. He spoke all over the world, and he has a great quote, which I put in my blog every Valentine's Day, and it's he said, "I love everybody, because as soon as I stop loving you, you own me." And that's an important quote too. That's in my book somewhere.
That's powerful. So much profound insight, Brian. Honestly, so grateful, so thankful, so appreciative of your time.
Same here.
Thank you for leaving us with so much of your wisdom. As Tony always says, he says there's so many people out there seeking information, but starving for wisdom. And
right.
You left a ton of wisdom here for everybody that listens back or was live. So thank you again, Brian. We appreciate you. We thank you. and we look forward to connecting again.
Thanks, Eric.